All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Persian and the Cowboy podcast. He's the Persian, I'm the Cowboy. Thank you guys all for showing up. And today we're going to be discussing the recent meeting between Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin in Russia. Mr. Persian, what are your first opening thoughts?
Cowboy, I'm shaking my head because China is now asserting themselves as a world power, meaning that they already were a world power, but now they're becoming the clear heir apparent to becoming a superpower, to beating America. When you become the policeman of the world and you're making deals with countries like you look at China right now. China sees Russia as a desperate country. Russia is getting their ass kicked in Ukraine. They need weapons. They need money. Putin's popularity is going down in Russia. The oligarchs are barking at him. They want this war to end in Ukraine. So what does he do? He calls his friend Xi Jinping, and he calls Xi, and he says, come to Moscow. I'm going to have some vodka and caviar, but I need your help badly. And what this was a meeting of convenience for China. They went there and said, hey, all the Western goods that you've been banned from, I'm going to hook you up with Chinese goods. And then the second thing is, I'm going to hook you up with weapons, an arsenal of weapons, drones, fighter jets. I'm going to start arming you so that way you can succeed in Ukraine. Because the thing is, China cannot afford Russia to fail in Ukraine because it's a huge dent for them. And this was also a meeting of an alliance together, the new Axis powers, this generation's Axis powers. You got 4 countries, Cowboy, that are the quadruple entente, not the triple entente, but the quadruple entente. You have China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. The 4 biggest enemies of the United States are now joining forces with Russia and China in cahoots together to get this situation to derail America and dislodge America as the number 1 power in the world. And you know what, Cowboy? It's working. It's working. America needs to wake the fuck up. Joe Biden needs to wake the fuck up. Everybody needs to smell the coffee because it's happening right under our noses. China is now asserting itself. Just the other week, real quick before you engage in this conversation.
When you're on a roll, you're on a roll. You
know? China just met with Iran and Saudi Arabia. Why did they meet with Iran and Saudi Arabia? And by the way, Iran and Saudi Arabia are mortal enemies. They hate each other. There is a Cold War in the Middle East going on between Iran and Saudi Arabia. So China made a deal between these guys and said, you guys have to work out your beef because there's a mutual interest. China wants to expand its influence in the Middle East, and they need access to oil and natural gas. So they want to make this deal happen because it benefits them. China is literally taking over under our noses.
Yeah, so let's reel it back a little bit. So your first statement with China, Xi Jinping meeting with Vladimir Putin, is China actually... Did they strike a deal where China is going to be actually sending arms and armaments over to Russia? So that's really going to happen.
Absolutely. So let's get to your point that you're backing me up because I got very excited. I went on a tangent because I love world politics.
We're going to get to Iran and Saudi Arabia.
We will.
Of course, but yeah.
But to start with the first point that you mentioned, so the caviar and vodka meeting that they had last week in Moscow, Vladimir Putin, as we know, is very desperate right now. They are losing their war in Ukraine. The Ukrainians are fighting hard and very brave, and they're being armed heavily by the United States and NATO, and it's working. The Ukrainians are fighters. That is their land. They are trying to gain back all the cities they lost in the territory, and the Russians are not the old Soviet Union. They are not as well prepared, and they're not as strong as they used to be. So the oligarchs in Russia who have a lot of power are telling Vladimir Putin, dude, what the fuck? I thought this war was going to be easy, but we're getting our ass kicked. So as a lifeline, he has begged Xi to come to Moscow, and they strike a deal to align with one another. And in exchange, they signed a lot of an economic package deal, a deal that's going to have a lot of interest for China and Russia, but mainly for China. So China, on one end, is going to give the Western goods that Russia was banned from because of the sanctions. China is going to replace those goods by selling their own goods to Russia, from spare parts and new planes, commercially, goods, food, clothing, liquids like liquor, things like that. And then also you have weapons.
The Russians need more liquor.
They need more liquor, but I'm talking about everything they're going to sell to Russia. Everything that China makes are going to sell to Russia, including arms. more weapons, technologies, drones, because Russia wants drones. They're running out of a lot of different equipment and they need drones to fire back on Ukraine. They've asked Xi to provide that. They've asked Xi for weapons, long-range missiles, even fighter jets.
Well, and I know the Russians have lost a lot of weaponry in the last Ukrainian offensive when the Ukrainians pushed them back from a lot of the captured territories previously. The Russians basically just abandoned their guns and vehicles and armaments and just ran out of there like the United States leaving Afghanistan. But it's interesting to me. So I've heard, I agree with a lot of that. The only one I haven't heard about is them agreeing to supply weapons to Russia. To me, this seems like it's more of an alliance out of desperation on both countries' sides. They are both desperate. Russia's getting hit hard by the trade sanctions that the West has put on them.
Destroying them.
Exactly. And then China is in a predicament too, because they are using this as a model of what an invasion of Taiwan is going to look like if they go through with it. And China is desperate for two things: oil and for food and supplies for that people. They're one of the largest food importers in the world, and they are one of the largest oil importers in the world.
Right.
Two things that Russia actually has in a surplus of. They are huge wheat production, and they have natural gas and oils. The tricky part about that is getting it from Russia to China.
Yeah.
There's no pipeline going straight through there. You got Siberia, you got deserts, you got
Mongolia, you got a lot of things there.
It's hard to transport it from where it's being produced to China directly. So that's why China is very heavily invested into Saudi Arabia and Iran having peace right now. Because if the Persian Gulf shuts down, China is screwed.
They're fucked. Well, everybody's fucked, but especially China.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you this, Cowboy. This deal that they struck in Moscow is not only just beneficial for both countries in terms of Russia, needing supplies and weaponry and, a lifeline against Ukraine, but it's also an alliance to dislodge the United States as the number one superpower in the world. Because what's their common denominator? Their common enemy is the United States. China wants to take over the world. They want to be the number one superpower, and they're the number two superpower right now, and they are slowly inching closer and closer to the United States. They see a United States internally that has a lot of division, that has a lot of problems socially. They have a lot of issues, and they see an opportunity, and they are reaching out to different countries to become the policemen of the world. What other country in the world gets two enemies, Iran and Saudi Arabia, together to strike a peace deal and to form an economic alliance? That was the job of the United States for a long time, but now China is trying to insert itself, and that's a major red flag. And China's not doing this because they care about Iran and Saudi Arabia. They're doing it because they want access to all that oil in Saudi Arabia and Iran, and they want access to the Persian Gulf because they know as they grow as a military power and superpower, they are going to need access to all those resources. So we had two things happen, Cowboy. We had this deal in Moscow that happened, and the deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia and China that happened about 2 weeks ago. So we're having a lot of things. We're having a lot of mic issues here, but my man Cowboy's saving me.
It's all good. Yeah, it's I think it's a it's a deal out of necessity for them, and these are two plays coming from two desperate nations. So we look at China. What is China's economy based upon?
China's economy?
Yeah, their economy.
Their economy is based on many facets, but one of them is manufacturing.
That's pretty much their entire thing is manufacturing.
Yeah.
Manufacturing is what has made them into a world power that they are today. And
it's because of us.
Yeah, it's because of us. We wanted cheap labor, and
it's coming to bite us back in the ass.
The Chinese people were pretty much enslaved by the totalitarian dictatorships that they had in the Chinese Communist Party. And so they always had access to extremely cheap labor. Now, the problem is that labor is running out. China now has more people in their 40s than they do in their 20s, 30s, 10s, everything like that. The younger generation does not exist because of the one-child policy that they've been enforcing since the 1980s that they didn't lift until like 2015. The Chinese birth rate right now...
Bring this up. Look at my man. He's coming with facts. I love it, dude. Get those facts out.
Yeah, let me find this. Okay, so to maintain a population, you need to have a birth rate of 2.1 children per mother. And the Chinese population birth rate right now is 1.16. They are dying off as a race. They are just going extinct due to the lack of birth and reproduction. And they've been doing it, self-inflicting it since the one-child policy came into existence. And so they are going to age as fast as they possibly can. And this goes back to my previous point about their manufacturing drying out. If you're not able to keep a young workforce employed that has cheap labor available, then the price is going to go up because there's not enough supply for those laborers. So their price is going to go up. And now it's now cheaper to manufacture in Mexico than it is to manufacture in China.
Absolutely.
So they are doomed because that's what their economy is based upon. And then if you get rid of globalism, then then China doesn't have access to trade outside of its little bubble.
Yeah.
Then China is screwed right there too. They don't have a lot of push. They have natural enemies surrounding them in the South China Sea, Japan, Korea, the Philippines, Vietnam,
Taiwan.
Australia, Indonesia. None of those guys, if we shut down, if one of those guys goes to war with China, that whole place becomes a quagmire, and all of a sudden you're not able to get any shipping or transport out of China anymore, and their economy dries up. But they're also dying off. Another thing to know about China, they are a multi-ethnic nation.
Yes, they are.
They have the
Uyghurs.
Yeah, the northern Hans, the Uyghur Muslims out in the east or the west, and then you got in like South China. It's a different population from that. They have two different Chinese languages.
Yeah.
You got Tibet. It's all different ethnic groups, backgrounds right there. It's more similar to what what Rome looked like when it had conquered the Mediterranean and Europe as a collective. These are all different ethnic groups. And so as this empire comes crumbling down, the different ethnic groups have the ability to fight back and create their own little countries again. So I think we're going to see something like that coming forward. So this is an act of desperation from China and from Russia. They're not natural allies. They don't like each other.
They don't.
They're somewhat communist backgrounds, but they're just totalitarian dictatorships at this point. And so it's only based on mutual benefit and desperation for survival at this point.
Absolutely. And I do agree with your statements. Beautifully said, Cowboy. I will say that I'm less optimistic than you are, because I know we've had this conversation behind closed doors. We've had this in public, whatever. I will say that I've always been very worried about China for the last decade, and even more as we pass every year. But they are literally, this is a drumbeat of war right here. The alliances that they're forming with Russia and North Korea and Iran and other countries who are not friendly to the West and the United States, we are slowly inching closer to a potential third world war. We have multiple theaters. We have theaters in Asia, the South Pacific. We have a theater in Europe. We have potential destruction and war going on in the Middle East. We have a lot of different theaters of potential conflict, which, in my opinion, we're getting very close to a third world war, especially with these alliances that are being formed. You just look at China. China is striking deals with former Soviet republics like Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan. All the old Russian republics are now answering to China. China is making moves. You look at the United States. China owns so much land here. They have so much, farmland. Why the fuck does China own all this farmland in the United States? There should be a law that bans foreign governments and foreign entities from owning any land or real estate in the United States. And the ones that are here right now, their properties should be seized by eminent domain and given back to the United States of America. I do not agree with foreign countries, especially adversaries, owning land, real estate, or intellectual property in this country. You look at TikTok, for instance. TikTok should be ours. TikTok, we should take over TikTok, and that CEO, whatever his name is, Jin or whatever the fuck, he should be in jail. He's a Chinese agent. He's a Chinese spy collecting information for China. TikTok is a spy app for China, okay? It's not a social media app. It is a spy app for China. That's what it is. China is meddling in our affairs everywhere. They are interfering. They have thousands of Chinese spies in the United States who are now citizens but are formerly from China that are watching us. You had a guy that enlisted in the Marines who was a Chinese spy taking photos of certain installations. You had the spy balloon situation that has happened repeatedly. You also had the Los Alamos lab situation where you had a scientist who was a Chinese scientist but was a spy. They later found out. A lot of countries spy on each other, but China is making a lot of moves because they want to be top dog, and they are getting closer and closer, and we need to start getting adversarial with them. We need to start placing bans on Chinese student visas. No more Chinese student visas or H-1B visas from China coming to the United States. Ban it. All intellectual property, land, and real estate, banned. Seize that land for the United States. And the final thing is, once we get a Republican president in office and not a Democrat ally of China, Beijing Biden, China Joe, we need to put 60% tariffs on all Chinese goods. We need to get tough on China because we're getting close to war with them.
So I think I agree with pretty much everything you're saying there, except for I think the overall motives are like. So let me take a step back.
Yeah.
So China's under pressure, right?
Right.
They're dying off. Their economy and their way of life is based upon globalism, and that's going away. Globalism's over.
Globalism sucks.
It's done. Everything's going to start coming back to the United States.
Good.
And we're realizing that if we want to, we don't have to be the world police. We can just let the world do its own thing, and we can just live in the United States and go from there. Now, the fear is that you're going to have another World War II situation come up where someone takes over Europe and the United States has to get involved, and that's going to be a greater toll and cost on life. That's the justification for globalism with it. So the strategy after World War II for the United States has been, we are going to stop the spread of communism. We're going to stop the USSR by any means necessary, and we're going to bribe the rest of the world to be on our side. And that's how these free trade agreements came up, and where the United States entered in all these trade deficits with all these other countries.
Horrible.
And all the foreign aid that we start giving out to the rest of the world too. You know, if you're going to become communist, you're going to lose that foreign aid, and so people get scared. And so with when the Soviet Union collapsed, the United States celebrated, and we thought that, cool, the Cold War's over.
Yeah.
China didn't think of it that way. China's been in a Cold War with us ever since then, and has been trying to go for it. Yeah, and so they've been competing with us. So if you're China and Russia, and you know that you cannot defeat the United States through a conventional war, what is the only way that you can do it, right? I think it's Abraham Lincoln said, "A house divided cannot stand."
Yeah.
And I think that has been their mission. That's been their goal. Try their best to get us fighting with each other. And that's why, as the American people, we need to stick together. We need to be a one unit and fight off our enemies together. And if we do that, nothing can stop us. Nothing can hurt us except from our division from within. And that's the only way that the United States of America will ever lose one of these wars. Now, with Russia, their motives are similar to China, where they're dying off.
Oh, yeah, they're in worse shape.
Their birth rate is at 1.5 women or births per woman, so not as bad as China's is right now, but they're still in a crisis, right? And they're trying to get back all their territory they had from the Soviet Union so that they can defend their country better than that. So they're just trying to make their last stand, right? They don't have the population in the next generation to do a war like this. This is the last time they have the boys to actually send them off to go fight. So they're trying to do it now. And if America just sits back, I think we're going to be okay. But the problem is, are they going to take over before, or they're going to go down swinging, right? And they got nukes. That's the scary part of it.
I mean, here's the thing. You said a lot of good points. I don't want to get to each one, but we also have nuclear weapons too. Let's not forget that. We can defend ourselves. But the question is, and I know you're not either, but I'm just saying a general statement. Isolationism never works because we were isolationists for a long time after World War I, for the most part. And what happened? A lot of the countries that were leading the world at the time, and we took a back seat, on our own fruition, they didn't police the world very well. And Adolf Hitler started rebuilding Germany in the 30s, and a lot of people were warning, like Winston Churchill was warning Neville Chamberlain, hey, this guy Hitler, he's building Germany, but he's militarizing them, and there's something going on. And no, Chancellor Hitler has assured me he's not going to do anything, and he started annexing territories. No, Chancellor Hitler told me this, and then all of a sudden 1940-41 hits, boom, World War II. The same situation is happening. If America takes a step back from the world stage, we can't afford that because we are going to for sure have a World War III situation. We have so many conflicts in the world. I'm not worried about Russia. Russia is in bad shape economically. Their own people don't want this war that's going on in Ukraine. The average Russian doesn't want it. Even the oligarchs are tired of this shit. They want to get their money back from Putin. At the end of the day, the Russian military needs to get together, need to do a coup on Vladimir Putin and kill him, his followers, and anybody with him, because they are destroying Russia. His regime is destroying Russia, number one. Number two, with China, China is much stronger than Russia. And they see an opportunity. They see a Russia that is collapsing. They see an America that's divided. I mean, America's more concerned about how many genders you can create and not about the situation, which is very scary, okay? Number one.
Well, that's them trying to keep us divided.
Exactly.
Too, you know? If they keep us arguing with each other about non-issues.
Well,
then,
I mean, China is also doing a lot of stuff with misinformation. You have the fentanyl war going on. The fentanyl is just not coming from Mexico. It's coming from China. They're trying to kill our youth.
It's coming through Mexico, but shipped in from China. Yeah.
They're trying to kill our youth.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yeah, they're definitely
They want this to happen. This is, to me, that is a declaration of fucking war. And when that happens, you strike back in a very harsh way. I don't care if that country has nukes. We have nukes too. Bring it. Let me see what I'm going to do. I'm going to put troops in Taiwan. I'm going to put more troops in the South China Sea. But what I'm getting at, let me get organized on this, is that we as America, and you said on the point, we have to become a unit. We cannot be divided on various issues. It's okay to disagree, but we can't destroy ourselves. Our democracy is at stake. We have powers on both sides, from the liberal left that want to destroy this country. We have powers on the right, from the far right, that want to destroy this country. We need to become one, because we have greater enemies at length, not just domestic, but abroad. We have China, who wants to dislodge us, as I mentioned a couple times, as the number one superpower. And if we don't get serious about some of the things that I mentioned in terms of solutions and combating this threat, it could be very catastrophic for America's democracy, and it could be the end of America's empire as we know it. If we don't get serious, we need to figure out a solution in our national debt. Our infrastructure is lacking, social problems, societal problems. We need to fix this. And I'm going to say a controversial statement. I don't care. I love controversy. You know that. We need to expand our military. We need to actually do a 2-year mandatory military service for all men and women to get prepared for a potential third world war and to have that option at hand.
I'd say I'd agree with you for the men right there. I think women are far more important than men. And that's one thing that China is running into right now, because their birth rate has been terrible since the one-child policy has been initiated. But in their culture, they valued men more than they did women. And your population's ability to regrow is dependent upon how many women that you have in your society. And so they were, getting rid of the female babies so they could have the men. And so they have a surplus of men in China right now. And so, one man can impregnate, 90 girls in a week, right? It'd be a crazy week, but dang. But,
it's like Wilt Chamberlain style. Shout out Wilt Chamberlain.
But one woman can only have one baby every 9 months, you know? And so the regrowth is dependent upon how many women that you have there, which is why women will always be more important than men in our societies.
And that's a very true statement. But at the same time, now times have changed. You have women generals, you have women admirals.
Absolutely. And I would say, like, if women want to join the military, by all means, join the military. If you are destined to defend your country and your nation, by all means, go for it. I would also say, though, the standard is the standard. You cannot give them a lighter standard to achieve like a rank or something like that.
Right.
If you're a lady and you want to become a Navy SEAL, you have to go through the exact same training that all the other Navy SEAls
and they
go
do.
through.
They kick fucking ass. But
you cannot give them a shorter bar to clear.
Oh, no.
It has to be exactly the same.
And Cowboy, I know what you're saying, but I think the tensions of the United States and China are at an all-time low. I think since 4 decades ago. I think the tension, the relationship is getting less and less and less. It's coming to an all-time low from like 4 decades ago.
I thought you meant there wasn't like tension and friction.
No. There's a lot. Yeah. I mean, this is stuff like during the 1970s and, during the whole communist situation. The relationship with China and the United States has always been a very strange relationship, but it's at an all-time low. And it should be at an all-time low. But the problem is you have a Biden administration, a president, Joe Biden, who him and the Biden crime family and his son, Hunter Biden, have struck tens of millions of dollars of deals with private Chinese companies, and they're pocketing from it. Why is this not being investigated? Why is this not being discussed? Is Joe Biden a Chinese agent? Is he an agent? Is he a Manchurian candidate that he's been influenced and bought by China? Does he speak Mandarin? I want to know if he speaks Cantonese or Mandarin.
He doesn't speak English. Of course he doesn't speak
Well, he has
Mandarin.
Alzheimer's disease, and it's proven. But Joe Biden's been compromised. He's a Chinese agent. His family, they're all corrupt. You have any politician that's doing business, and I've said this multiple times, with any foreign entity, especially an adversary, and it's crucial and detrimental to our national security, needs to be investigated, prosecuted, convicted, and arrested. Yeah. I don't care what that is. It is a threat to our national security. And the whole Biden relationship with China is very eye-opening. And the media, the corrupt fake news media, which is on the side of Joe Biden, does not report on this.
Yeah, it's a interesting thing that doesn't happen. And I wish it was more readily available to see where the funding was coming for these guys. We got to do a deep dive on that.
We got to do some deep dive.
We should do a spotlight on where the money's coming from for each politician, and then call them out.
What did you say last week? Follow the money, dude.
Follow the money. Always follow the money.
Follow the money, baby, dude.
Yeah,
there you go,
baby. Yeah,
there you go.
Follow the money, baby. So I want to bring up a interesting thought between isolationism and globalism. And to me, it kind of reminds me of ancient Greece and how they interacted with Persia, right? So, the United States, we're getting out there, we're giving money, and we're just, okay, if we can keep our enemies fighting with each other, then we're safe at home. They're going to be weak and everything's going to be fine. They're just going to kill each other. And as long as we keep making the war go and the military industrial complex keeps everyone at war, then we're making money. Our enemies are weak and fighting each other and always in hurt and injured and whatnot, then we're going to be fine, right? So if you go back to ancient Greece and Persia, so we're all familiar with the movie 300 and the Battle of Marathon and Thermopylae, where the 300 Spartans fought off the millions of Persians. That came across.
It's a very sore subject for me as the Persian, but yes.
I know exactly. I don't know how much Greek blood I have, but yeah.
There you go.
I think I'm more of a Northern Europe mutt than I am.
There you go. A little Viking blood in you, my friend.
Who knows?
In the halls of Valhalla, but go ahead, sir.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, if I ever give the government my DNA, I guess we'll check it out.
Yeah, let's not do that because they're doing some nefarious things with their stuff.
But so the Persians got their butt kicked when they tried to invade Greece.
They did.
And then they were like, well, Greece is only powerful if they're united. And so Persia was like, why don't we just keep funding both sides and keep Athens and Sparta and
fighting,
the Corinthians and everyone fighting each other, the Macedonians. And that was the thing for a couple hundred years. They just gave them money. And just keep them fighting. You got here, your weapons here, there's weapons there. You guys will be fighting. And they're just sitting back, drinking their cocktails and walking around in their slippers and their fancy outfits and their capital in Iran. And eventually it got to a point where one power in Greece got so powerful, they conquered all of it. And they were like, oh my gosh. And so they had just been breeding the most savage warriors that have ever existed for a couple hundred years. Those are
real men, too.
A couple hundred years of men just battling each other out. Yeah. Imagine how strong they'd be. Yeah. And then the Persians are just partying all the time, getting weak, getting soft.
Getting messed up on wine.
Getting more feminine and everything out there.
Yeah.
They became soft, weak men.
Yeah.
And then these savages on the corner of the empire that got so strong from all the fighting they'd done, provided by the Persians, rose up and conquered all of Persia.
And that was ass.
Alexander the Great.
Yes.
Macedonia conquered all of Greece.
Shout out Colin Farrell. Wonderful film, Alexander.
Yeah, and so he took over all of Greece, and then he was like, you know what? Let's just take over all of Persia. And he had the savages to do it. Yeah. And so that's the thing that we got to watch out for as Americans. It's like we can keep our enemies fighting over and over and over again, but if we become soft ourselves and we're not ready to go to war and defend our lands and our people, there's a very good chance that some barbarians come in and take us out and go from there.
Well, that's happening right now. I mean, you hit it on the button. America has so many fucking issues. You talk about this infighting with each other over some dumb things too about
Yeah.
how many genders you can have, what does identify as. Like, this is getting out of control.
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't have any real problems. So
we
we're
don't
making
have any real
problems
problems, so we're looking for stuff. Let's put tampons in the 7-year-old boy's bathroom. I don't understand that. Like, these things are problems that we're creating for no reason, and that the liberal left wants to do this to create chaos. So at the end of the day, Cowboy, to wrap up this segment, we need to be more aligned with each other. We need to be more as a unit. We need to understand there are greater things at risk. And we as a country need to understand that this threat of China is real. China has bought so much land here in the United States, as I mentioned, real estate and intellectual property that needs to be seized by the United States in favor of national security. It's a threat to our direct national security. We have a lot of spies and adversaries among us that are living in this country. We have issues overseas now. We're losing our foothold in many different places around the world, and China's taking over as the mediator and negotiator. And that's incorrect, because we were the policemen of the world, and now we're losing our grip because we are becoming weak. We have this national debt situation. We have a lot of problems between Democrats and Republicans. And this whole globalism thing, the elitist globalism shit, they still want to run on globalism. Globalism doesn't work, folks. Does not work at all. We need to bring the jobs back to America, the manufacturing back to America. In the end, we created this monster with China because we gave all of our manufacturing to them to make more money and to do it cheaply, and they capitalized on it.
Exactly, yeah.
We fucked ourselves. The moral of the story is America keeps fucking itself over and over and over again, whether it's being the Middle East, Asia, Central America, South America, Mexico. We need to think smart. Stop doing this for the almighty dollar. You'll make your money. If there's harmony around the world, you'll still make money. I don't understand this.
Yeah, and there's one other point I want to bring up, like that helps me sleep a little bit better at night too.
Bring it, because I need to sleep better
if
myself.
we're talking about military force stacking up against each other, the Russians are always terrible in the first year of a war.
They've lost like 100,000 troops.
Yeah, but that's just their strategy. They're like World War One. The Germans' plan, the Schlieffen plan, was to invade France, destroy France, but they knew that Russia would declare war on them because they were allied with France, right? So their plan was like, well, we know the Russians are incompetent, so they're going to take forever to get their military together. So if we kill France really quickly, then we'll have time to get our guys over to Russia and go from there. But then the French held on longer than they thought they were going to, and then they had to. That's how Germany got screwed in World War One.
Absolutely.
And World War II, much of the same thing. Look how well the Germans did in the first year of fighting with the Soviets. They pushed them all the way back. They got
almost were to Moscow.
Almost got to Moscow.
12 miles outside of Moscow. Operation Barbarossa.
Yeah, so the Russians are so used to losing a couple 100,000 men in the first year of the war.
Yeah.
And then they organize, they figure out, oh yeah, this is how we need to fight. And then they get a couple million more men, and then they throw men at the problem. They are okay with casualties. So they're going to just keep pushing back.
They lost like 20 million people in World War II. They were completely fine.
Yeah.
Stalin killed a lot of people too.
Precisely. I mean, they're paying for the reproduction issues from that right now, but that's the thing. So the Russians are, it's always been an arms race in developing fighter planes and the stealth technology and everything like that. So the Russians have the Su-57, which is their top of the line air superiority stealth fighter, right?
Right.
How many do you think they have in production or like have in service right now?
Right now?
Yeah, just take a guess.
3,000.
They have 11.
11?
They have 11 in service right now.
Jesus.
Yes. So that is, and they're not even using them because they're scared to lose them, and they want to be selling them to Iran in the future or something like that.
They want to sell to Iran, to Saudi Arabia. They want to do that.
They don't want it to go into action and be seen how
shot
good it
down
is.
in Ukraine with the surface air Patriot missile.
Yeah. So the Chinese, they have their J-20 stealth fighter, which they developed after a leak on American stealth technology. So we gave them a lot of our data and design work on one of our planes. They have the J-20 stealth fighter. How many of those do you think they have in production or in
now I'm going to go lower. I'm going to go 100.
They have 200 in service.
Okay,
right?
that was a good guess.
Yeah, not bad. Yeah. So they have 200 of those in service right now. Okay. So the F-22, which was developed in I think the 80s.
The Raptor?
The Raptor, baby.
Yeah,
that's
I love
a badass plane.
That's a badass plane.
And it was put into production, I think, in the 90s. I'd have to double check the dates on that. I think it first flew in the 90s. So we were like,
shout out Lockheed Martin.
we were already like 2 decades ahead of them in this technology.
Yeah.
How many of those do you think we have in service?
400.
We have 187 of them in operational in service right now.
That's
but then
great.
the F-35, our newest jet,
That's a badass
that's the one that
jet.
can take off vertically
Take
on
off
the fighter
vertically
planes.
and all that. That's a nice one.
That we have on
That's
all
that
of our
UFO
aircraft
technology
characters.
right
Not
there.
to mention how many aircraft carriers we have. We have, guess how many of those in
The F-35
yeah, F-35.
in service right now.
Yeah,
I'm going to 126.
890.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when it comes down to air superiority, we
I'm
have
getting
that taken
aroused
care
right
of.
now
So-
thinking about this.
So the only thing that I'm afraid of is if they start using nukes. Like that's the
Well,
only
dude,
thing to be
if they start using nukes, let me just tell you. First of all, Russia, China, the United States, any nuclear country on the planet knows nobody can win in a nuclear war.
Yeah.
Nobody can win a nuclear war. It's going to be ultimate devastation. You're going to have hundreds of millions of people dying, bunch of animals dying, species. It's going to be the end of the world. But if somebody dares to fire a nuclear missile, there's going to be 10 missiles headed that way.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, but
Mutual
I'm not going to
assured
stand for
destruction.
that.
All right,
We'll
so
stand.
let's wrap it up. What give us your last thoughts on the China and Russia issues?
Folks, my final thoughts are this, and I've already repeated this statement, so I'm not going to repeat it again, but I will say this. China is not our friend. They're our enemy. They're the biggest enemy of the United States, but China is now forming a quadruple entente, not the triple entente that we learned in school, but the quadruple entente. You have China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran all in cahoots with each other and smaller countries who are allied to them, and they are forming their alliance, and we need to start getting tougher. We need to start getting more adversarial, and we need to send a message to these countries. We need to do something because America is looking weak these days, and we need to do something because we need to show America's strength, and we show strength through force, and I miss those days.
Yeah, and I would finish up with the final thoughts of, if it comes to a head-to-head combat between China and Russia, I think the United States is going to be okay. But I would say, though, that the history books are probably going to state that World War III has already started.
Oh, it started. It
Yes.
started, but they just don't want to announce it.
And now it's just coming down to how extensive is this war going to become. And if we can stop the Russians in Ukraine before they start expanding past that, then I think we have a good chance of, all right, it's over, and then we can just let China and Russia die on their own terms.
Yeah.
And we can go from there. But their best strategy is to keep the United States people divided as possible and us arguing about nonsense problems that aren't real. So if we keep arguing about that and we destroy ourselves, as Abraham Lincoln said, a house divided cannot stand. We need to stand together, and we need to acknowledge that we do have common enemies. The other thing is, there's an idea going around in America where people are like, oh yeah, if you just love everyone, then everyone will love you and we can just spread love. There's people out there in the world that they don't care. They're just going to take. They're going to enslave.
Yeah.
They don't care about democracy.
I want to take over the barbarians.
Yeah, it's a rarity in human society.
I don't believe in
to have
that
rights
love
like
bullshit, by the way. It's
Yeah.
some hippie crap, dude. I don't believe in that
Human
shit.
nature is way more complicated than just I'll love people and they'll love me
Yeah,
back.
because the person that wants to take over, they're going to kill you. They're going to fuck you in the ass.
Yeah, so we don't.
There you go. A little bit of insertion right
I
there.
know, right? Yeah, jeez. I don't know. Move to Russia, see how they take that stuff over there.
Oh, yeah. They don't like that shit.
Yeah,
Believe
yeah.
me.
But I think that's the thing is like if we are divided on these issues and we don't come together as people and learn how to talk about our differences and learn how to talk about issues and just even though we don't agree on stuff, it's okay. We're still all American people. We love our democracy, we love our republic, and we're going to continue to support the democratic republic that we have here today. So
We do an amen, cowboy. Amen. We got to defend our republic too, my friend. Wonderful episode. Folks, that's all the time we have today. I'm the Persian. He's the cowboy. Happy Friday and so long.
cheers, y'all.
Cheers.